Get Pucked. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Dave, Matt, and Vito here. We are post-draft. So I'm pretty sure you know what it is. Like Vito right there. Do a happy dance. Throw your hands up in the air. Put on your favorite tunes. Because I'm pretty sure it's unanimous. And I'm pretty sure, at least for me, it's the first time that I can remember in this fandom that everybody seems to be happy at the same time. They got it right. They got the guy I think everybody wanted them to get. Gentlemen, right off the bat, how do we feel?
The Habs fans are all united for the first time in forever. That's what's happened. Even the ones that have been crapping all over the Habs and have been such negative people, everyone seems to be united. It's like peace, like a truce has happened between all Habs fans.
Does it make you uneasy? Does it make you uneasy? We're so used to the fan base being kind of fractured. This weird utopia right now, it almost makes me feel a little bit like, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop? But it isn't. They got the guy. Demidov is a Montreal Canadien. He was taken 5th overall. For the one or two people that were living under a rock that don't know this, that's who they ended up drafting at 5. And I can't be any happier. I know there was some toss-ups. Some people were talking about, oh, they could use Lindstrom. Oh, what about Tijagila? Oh, this. Enough. It was Demidov. This is the guy they needed. They needed a game breaker. They needed a guy to come in, be in the system that immediately you can look at and say the expectation is 90 to 100 points.
They got the guy, and I know how Dave loves projections, so I'm going to say it anyways. They got a guy who his projections are that even his floor is better than our highest point player in Suzuki. His floor is a 70 to 80 point player. His ceiling is 100 points.
Yeah.
Now, a lot has to happen to get to that point. He's got to come to the NHL, show he's capable of doing it. But everybody's walking away. Every analyst, every scout, every article you've read, everything you listened to on TV or the radio, basically Montreal got the steal of the draft. Remains to be seen. But right now, we can all be happy that this was an excellent draft, probably the best draft the Hugo regime has had.
I'll get back to your steal comment in a second. Dave, pipe it. How do you feel, baby?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, honestly, I think this is a great move for the Canadiens. It's who everyone had pretty much circled on their board, and how he dropped the 5. I mean, that's pretty interesting to see how it went down. But at the end of the day, I think it's a great move. And now it's just arguably, it's funny because, we were talking about how Reinbacher got it rough and all these guys got it rough and had a rough go of it. But arguably, this guy's going to be under the most pressure of all. And then it's good pressure. But man, are the expectations high on this guy. And he now has to deliver that. And yep. I think he will. Honestly, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. I think that this regime has, has a good frame around him to really get him going and live up to his to the expectations. But the pressure is on. But for now, it's a very good year that you could probably ride this high of knowing that he's in the pipeline, and even like 2-3 years, because you got to give him some grace when he gets there. So very exciting time.
No, I think even Brian Wild had said that if this draft and drafting Demidov probably benefits Reinbacher the most, because all that pressure just completely came off of Reinbacher. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have pressure. He still has to become the 5th overall pick that they made last year, become that star defenseman, hopefully top pairing guy. But now that Demidov's there, people are not hammering the whole Michkov narrative as much anymore.
I don't know about that. I'll be honest with you. I saw the pick go down. I was super ecstatic about it. A couple hours later, people are still talking about it. And there were surefire people out there that were still suggesting we could have had Michkov and Demidov. I mean,
okay, yeah. And I'll ask the Toronto Maple Leafs if they want to balance out their roster a little more instead of having all that offensive firepower.
Listen, I'm simply saying that
you got to build a team.
One really, at this particular point, when I say the fandom's united, has nothing to do with the other, because you can start making the same sort of thing about all the picks, and everybody will have a different opinion of the past couple of years, of who they drafted. This year, it was odd. It was the first time. It was everybody. You can see it. The picks were coming. 1 went, 2 went, 3 went. And when Chicago took the defenseman at 2, and everybody's typing, the dream's still alive. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. And then all of a sudden, Seneke or however that you pronounce his name, goes at 3. Seneca, excuse me. It's like, oh my goodness, what is this? And then it's Columbus. Is Columbus going to do it? And everybody said they're going to take Lindstrom if he's there. That was everybody talking about this. And the moment you heard Lindstrom, it was like you couldn't scroll Twitter fast enough.
Well, you held your breath. Minds. I'm sure you held your breath like everybody else, saying, okay, is Montreal going to just surprise us if they do it also? Like everybody held their breath there. And then with all the rumors that all the teams tried to get into fourth to what we assume was to get Demidov and all that, it's like, is this really going to happen? And then finally, Montreal, Silencio comes out, and guess what? She announces it, and it's right away, fist pump the air, and you got that player.
It's a monumental moment. It's something I like to also touch on this because I thought it was fascinating too, and I think it was Brian Wild as well who mentioned it. He goes, the rebuild is over. And people are kind of taking that out of context and like, what do you mean the rebuild's over? They're not going to compete next year. Demidov's not coming. No. From how he explained it, which I agree with, you have the pieces in place now. They're in your pipeline. You're not going to try to go out and get these future guys to come in who are going to be your top 6 and your top 4 on defense. They're arguably missing maybe an upgrade in goaltending, but otherwise your top 6 for the most part and your top 4 on defense for the most part are done. You could always plug and play and do things in the future, but you have a core, you have a base. Now it's time to add. And this is the
would
first
say
time in
there's
years
still,
that they're there.
There's still a question mark. There's a few question marks. They're not as glaring as they were before. Obviously, with Demidov there, you have Hage and all that, but we don't know. Hage, by the way, very underrated. People
we'll get to Hage in a second. Yeah,
but we still don't know what's happening with Doc, right? We don't know if he's truly the second line center. On paper, he is. The way what they traded to get him, everything, all those things, it makes him the second line center. The fact that he got hurt as soon as he did last year, the bad luck that he got, it's still a question mark there. And to me, it's like you could still look to add a centerpiece because worst case scenario, move Doc to the wing, whatever the case may be. But if you look at the pieces, to what Brian Wild is saying, yes, if you look at all the prospects and players and young guys and all that, you can slot them everywhere in the top 6, the defense side. Goaltending, you still have Fowler that you could be excited about. There are things to move and pieces to move around, even on the third line. Like it's very promising. The future is very, very bright for Montreal. And with some of the pieces maturing now to begin with, I wouldn't even call it the future. It's even the present. It's very exciting.
I would agree with the sentiment. Dave, do you look at it and you say they got the pieces now, and now you can kind of look to the building, or there's still too many question marks? You still want upgrades?
I want upgrades.
Of course you do.
Definitely want upgrades. I mean, look, these guys are prospects for a reason. They still have ways to go, and they still have ways to go to prove that they could gel together as a team and they could fit. I mean, the pieces are arguably there, but are they for a contending team? I don't know. I'm not sure yet. I haven't seen exactly that. So the pieces I think are there, and I get what Brian Wild's trying to say in the sense that, okay, they don't need to go and fail this year and get a top 5 pick again. They can move on from that, and they could go ahead and try to maybe sign a free agent here or there, as you hear that they're pretty much in on a lot of these guys. I agree with that. It's just I'm hesitant to say the rebuild is over. They have a lot of work to do to still build this team. So I'm hesitant to say that the rebuild is over. I get the sentiment, but I think there's a lot of
I think they're more in a development phase, developing the players they have more so than going and acquire and draft the players they need to be able to develop them.
That's what it is. It's a language semantics thing. I mean, they are still rebuilding the team, but by definition of how he put it out, the rebuild means, like Vito suggesting, top 5 picks, finishing bottom, really bottoming out, getting rid of like your older guys that have any value to go and acquire draft picks and stuff. That's done now. We should not see this anymore. They're looking to now bring in. You got free agency that's just coming up. Like, you got stuff that's
now is the tricky part. Now is going to be the tricky part.
Now is the very hard part.
Yeah, they're going to have to be very cautious on how they give out contracts. Yes, the cap went up, but in a few years from now, some of those players that we're talking about that are, the Slavkovskis and all of that, are going to get big contracts. So you're going to have to see if Demidov, let's make no illusions. Yes, he's going to come out on the ELC and all that stuff. But if the guy comes out swinging, at the end of that ELC, could be very expensive. We don't know how much
Five,
money he's
6
going to
years
come
from now.
But still, but it's whatever contracts you give out now has an impact in 3, 4, 5 years from now too. You got to be careful. Not, a lot of general managers can have the tendency right now to go into free agency, lose their minds, and go give out an 8-year contract or 7-year contract, rather, not 8 years, and mess things up a little bit down the road.
For sure. And 5 years down the line, that's when they're going to be arguably contending. Like, I don't know, playoff contending, maybe probably before that, but, cup contending, it's going to take a while to get there. And that's exactly the time where all these contracts are going to be due. So it is definitely, Vito's right about that, man. You absolutely have to make sure and be careful about what you're doing. It's not just like, it was easy, for a while it was just like, okay, we'll take on this contract, we'll take on that contract. Now the hard work begins, really.
Well, but isn't Kent Hughes the perfect guy to be at the helm for this kind of thing as a former player agent? And he knows all about the cap. And he knows all about what makes players and bringing them in and trying to accommodate and do this whole thing that he's doing. Like, that's the kind of guy. I prefer a guy like him with his background than a former player that's kind of at the helm. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got to give this guy his dues, i.e. the Brendan Gallagher contract and stuff. And this isn't taking a shot at Mark Bergevin, but just in general. You know what I mean? Like a former player or a GM that's been out there for 100 million years in the league and just rotating through teams. These two type of guys, these two archetypes of GMs would be the ones I'd be concerned about at the helm right now that might be giving out those big contracts that would essentially jam you up 5 years from now. I think Kent Hughes is probably the perfect guy to be here right now to make sure that he has the foresight to know not to get into that trouble.
Well, I think he has the attributes for it, but it's still, to me, it's wait to see if he's going to be that perfect guy, because he has a lot of work. Again, the easy part's done. Taking a flyer on this guy and taking a flyer on this guy. I mean, like, he can't afford to take those flyers anymore if it's not going to pan out. Right now comes the real pro scouting and the real, you got to make it work. And so it's easy to say, yeah, he's a perfect guy. On paper, yeah, he's a perfect guy, but we have still yet to see that phase of this era of this regime. So I'm interested to see, I'll give them a year, 2 years to see and evaluate. I have no doubt that they'll be able to do it, to be honest. I have confidence.
So you're optimistic.
I'm optimistic, yes. And I have confidence that they'll be able to do it.
Okay.
But to just say that he's the perfect guy, I mean, I've been sold that before, so I'm willing to wait.
It's uncharted waters for him too, right?
Of course.
He's going to have – there's going to be players, and this is where it's going to be the biggest challenge for him, that he has to separate his love for the players versus the business side too. And I think you can do that based on everything he's saying and everything we've seen from him. It's he might love certain players that he was an agent to or whatever the case may be, and has to ensure that he's not going to distribute and give out all kinds of money in long-term contracts that might impact certain players.
Do you really think he would do that, though? From everything you've seen of him, does he strike you as the kind of guy that would be sitting there at a press conference with a tear running down his cheek talking about one of his guys?
No, I'm not saying – okay, I don't know if that was a jab to Mark Bergevin.
I still don't mean to jab Mark Bergevin, but I'm just saying.
That was a pretty,
you're talking about love of guys and stuff. I mean, it's the thing that.
But look at the guys. Look at a lot of the guys he's brought in. A lot of the guys he's brought in is guys that he's either known for a very long time, has known their families, Boston College. He was their agent. And it's good. It's fine. He has familiarity with them. He knows what their characters are. They're gonna blend. He knows exactly what he's getting from them. But for example, if everyone expects that Harris is going to get moved. If he's not moving Harris because, I know what this kid is all about, that. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but if he's one of those guys, we haven't seen that yet, but we're saying if he is one of those guys, it can be a problem. It's all going to be when the time comes, which side is going to kick in. Now, the good thing about it and what I really like about it is that back then when there was MB, there was nobody really overlooking any of MB's moves. It was Jeff Molson and Mark Bergevin. Now there is Jeff Gordon there to kind of maybe say, hey, if somebody's got to move, we got to move him. He is the president of hockey ops. So it's a bit different. There's a bit of a different management system than there was before.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying now we're getting to the point that because if we're basing ourselves on what Brian Wild was saying, it's going to be the hard part is really going to be that. Now, some people might say, no, it's going to be after next year because Montreal still got a bunch of draft picks. It's going to be right after the Gallagher and Price contracts are gone. And things like that. There's ways to debate that. But this draft, I find, advanced the Montreal Canadiens and to the next level. Like you can start now.
That's a fair assessment. And I mean, speaking of that, and I don't want to keep all the light on Demidov because I think that's a foregone conclusion. Everybody knows that this kid is dynamo on paper and is likely going to come and torch the league is the hope. And so that's great. Talking about the kid that apparently, word is, specifically traded the 26th overall and some other picks to move up to 21 in hopes of getting him. And it would seem that they also got him. And this is Michael Hage, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. And the story with this kid, if you haven't heard it, I'm not going to get into the whole thing here, but you're more than welcome to go find a whole slew of articles about it. He has a really unique story behind it. It's albeit a little bit sad, but it has a silver lining at the end here. Quick notes. He grew up Montreal Canadiens fan. He had a tragedy in the family. It's a hard thing. It's a recent thing. But then he gets drafted by the Canadiens. And then they talk about him as well. And this is a kid who also has a relatively high potential of being, I don't know, top line, but definitely they see him on a second line.
Player comparable, if you want to.
Jordan Kyrou, I believe.
Yeah, Jordan Kyrou was a name that got brought up. So, you know, if that's his ceiling for a player that you drafted 21st, and again, it's going to take a few years of development, all that stuff.
No doubt.
Having the right mindset, whatever. Okay, but if that's his ceiling, is it Jordan Kyrou as a 21st pick? And they traded up to get him, and with all
apparently that's who they wanted. I know Paul Yzerman went right before him, and people were talking, oh, maybe Yzerman falls, and maybe that's what they were trying to do. But supposedly, and again, this is all coming from after they made the pick, but supposedly this is the guy they wanted. They got both guys in the first round that they had at the top of their list, which is
traded up. They traded up to get this pick. They obviously had a player in mind. And now everything's pointing to the fact that he was that player no matter what. Doesn't matter if Yzerman, unless it was going to be some crazy thing where Bouillon was going to drop all the way to 21st. It seems like, when a team does that, it's because there was a specific player they just loved. And that's what they went to do. It was Michael Hage, it seems like. Everything we read, heard from other podcasts, whatever the case may be, articles, seems like that was the target no matter what.
Dave, your feeling on that pick, one way or another?
I mean, look, it looks interesting, to be honest. Hard to say. Again, haven't seen him play, haven't seen anything, but from what I'm reading about him, looks like a great pick. And if it's the guy they wanted, I mean, you've got to trust their scouting team a little bit and go here. I mean, they haven't had much luck in their late 20s picks, the Canadiens. We've talked about in past episodes, Sherback to Nordy, you could go McCarron, all of them. But I mean, this looks like they did their homework on this guy, and seems to be a good addition to the team, and it seems to be like a fan favorite type of guy. So I think that I like it, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table here going forward.
And spinning the next question right back at you, Dave, how do you feel about Koivu pick in the first pick or the first pick for the Canadiens that they had in the third round? A lot of people happy, obviously, with Saku being his father and everything. That was obviously another kind of a feel-good story, and a lot of people were very happy that it happened. However, I have been reading quite a bit of people suggest that maybe he was picked too high, and they should have and maybe could have tried to get him in a later third-round pick, and that they really just snapped at this because they just didn't want a chance of not getting him and deal with that kind of quote-unquote PR that they would have to do. So what do you think about him being picked?
So that's what it's funny, when Vito said, like, oh, he doesn't look like Kent Hughes doesn't seem like the type of guy who would do. I mean, we saw it with Florian,
Florian Xhekaj, yeah.
Xhekaj, we saw it with him, and then we see it a little bit here with Koivu, where they tend to go and do things that will appease, thing. I'm not saying it's the wrong move. From what I read from his scouting report, like he needs help with this power skating, and he needs help with this, and he needs to work on that, and he needs to work. But again, the third round is a crapshoot, right? Like I'm absolutely zero worried about this pick. I'm not bothered by it. If he doesn't make it, it's not the end of the world. Could they have gotten another player? Will we down the line look and the player drafted right after him as a stud? Sure. There's nothing to say that the Canadiens would have gotten that guy anyways with their pick or would have gone there. The third round and up is an absolute crapshoot. And anyone who says otherwise is just probably lying to you. So I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. It's a good story. It keeps keeps them in the good books. I like it. I'm fine with it.
How do you feel, Vito, about Koivu?
Listen, last episode we said that if some of these players have a right support cast and in this case it's his father and all that stuff. I said that about Aguila. There's somebody for this player to help him with his development outside of the Montreal Canadiens, and who better than Saku Koivu, who knows exactly what the Montreal market is like. So this kid, well, he was kind of exposed to it at a very early age, didn't stay very long, but I'm sure he's heard about it. He's knows
heard,
now.
yeah. The quick point was he specifically said he has no memories of being here and
He
seeing his dad
knows
play.
based on what his father has gone through and whatever, he's gonna have to step it up. He's gonna have to work really hard. And you know what? At any point, if he needs to lean on somebody, he can lean. Hey, pops, what's going on? This is what's happening, and to have that conversation with his dad. So there's a lot. If you look at it, I could base myself on some of the highlights and some of the scouting report. There's a lot of upside there, and if the Montreal Canadiens want to take him too high, it's because they felt that whether it's a PR move, whether it's the talent itself, there was something to work with there, and it was just right. It was a lot of people wanted Koivu there. I know it's the name a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Check that box. You got another asset. You got a guy who can shoot. He's got a good skill set. He has to work on some power skating. Everybody has to work on some power skating. Heck, even Demidov's got to work on some power skating. It was one of the things he had to work, that he said he had to work on, is being explosive. So what? It's a third-round pick. To Dave's point, it's a crapshoot. If it works out, great. If it doesn't,
it
was still Koivu's son.
Well, that's it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Again, not having seen much, if any, of his actual games, and just reading from what people and scouts have suggested. Was he taken probably a little high? Yes. But again, you're in the third round. All the other teams passed on him in the second round as well. He's high third round. What have you?
Third round. There was players that were in the first round that should have been drafted in the top 7, 8, and they dropped to 21. And you got players who were drafted 12 and 13, not mentioning any names, but you guys could figure it out, that probably should have been drafted at 21. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, but my point is simply saying that you go all the way through the entire second round, no one goes and makes a claim on him. So obviously, most teams are feeling the same thing. I mean, could he have been picked right after that pick where the Canadiens were and the 6th pick in the third round? Yeah. I mean, we don't know. I mean, it made sense. It was another feel-good thing. I think it just added to the reverence of that day. Everybody was slamming about Demidov, and we were all fires and cylinders going, and then all of a sudden, oh, we got Koivu's kid too. Oh my God, yeah. It was just good. I don't think it's a big deal. I feel 100% the same way Dave feels. It is a crapshoot. Whatever. Could they have maybe gotten this other guy? We'll find out in 5 years if he was even available.
Be serious.
I'm okay with it.
First round, there's nothing they could have done wrong. Nothing.
Well, there's that.
Nothing.
There's that.
The only thing they could have done wrong is made a catastrophic trade that would have negated what they did in the first round. There was nothing.
True.
They could have grabbed every pick after that and just been like, we just traded it all away for nothing.
Well, a lot of people are also...
all right, cool, we got Demidov. We got Hage. We're cool.
So the one thing that people were saying the cherry on top of that day would have been if they made a transaction of some kind, right? And it just so happens that a transaction occurred the day after the second round, I should say. So I want to get your take on this because it's pretty raw. I want to hear what you have to say, Dave, specifically, because this is your boy. I'm just making this up. But Jonathan Kovacevic has been traded. I think we all liked him. But Kovacevic has been traded to the New Jersey Devils for a 4th-round pick in 2026. The best of New Jersey's 2026 4th-round picks of whatever. Point is, there's a defenseman, the full cap off the books. He was the one that was moved. Your initial reaction on that?
The bodies needed to be moved out. Like it's time now. You have a log jam there. Bodies had to move. It's absolutely fine. The return is fine. Where he went is fine. I have nothing to say. I'm surprised he wasn't traded at the deadline, to be honest. I mentioned him, during our trade deadline shows about how he was a guy I had circled as a guy. He's an able-bodied NHL player who could, fill in if teams had trouble in their depth chart during the playoffs when guys get injured. So I'm fine with it. I think it's a good trade. I think I'm happy for him. I hope he does well in Jersey, who seems to be, primed for a bounce back season, I think, to get themselves back on track. So I think he'll fit in well there. And I think that he did a good service. I mean, he's a guy who in like 6 years, you'll be like, holy shit. Oh yeah, I forgot about him. But still, I mean,
I get what you're saying.
I'm happy for him. And
well, you're not going to say in 6 years. You're going to you're going to forget about him up until 2026 when it's time to draft him in the fourth round. Then you'll be like, oh yeah, it's true.
Will I really? I don't even know. I'll be like,
even that.
When they tell me they draft Blake Peters, and I'll be like, oh, this is the Kovacevic guy. Like, no, I probably won't.
Blake Peters. Okay.
First name that came to
listen, I got to agree with you. I happen to have liked the guy. I thought he had a couple good moments. I think the person is probably going to be missed more than the player. I heard and read nothing but good things about this dude, and I do wish him all the best in New Jersey personally. But to your point, it is a massive logjam. You got the guys coming up. You got to make room for these kids. They were showing enough there at the end of last year to show that he was probably going to be one of the guys that was going to either be popping in and out on injuries, and you got something for a waiver claim. I think at the end of the day, that's really good business. You got 130 something games out of him. You move on. I'm all for it. Vito, you have something you're shaking your head like, no.
Yeah, because I was going to say, what more do you want from a waiver claim? Fantastic result for a waiver claim.
Yes,
but you know what? It's a good addition for New Jersey. A right-handed defenseman who's physical, won't cause problems in the room. Is from everything we've seen and read, he's a very humble guy, and just he's one of those guys that just thinks that he's fortunate enough in life to earn a living playing a sport, and he does it effectively. So, listen, I thought that they would have moved somebody on the left-hand side more so than the right, because the depth on the right is not as deep as it is on the left. But it opens up a spot for somebody like Mayu or Ryan Bacher or whoever that they want to bring in right out of camp straight right away and say, hey, we'll deal with the growing pains in Montreal with this player, So specifically on the right side, obviously, that's why I mentioned those guys. But unless they add something, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt they're adding defense, but I guess anything is possible. But speaking of adding, I think it's important to note that now the conversation kind of changes. Obviously, people could have been talking about this ahead of time, but since Demidov is now in the system, and yes, he will not be here next year. Get that out of everybody's minds. There's no ifs, buts about that. It's not next year. It would be the following year, and likely making the team the following year, not playing in the AHL. So you're 1 year removed from Demidov. But because you got him now, and because he's in the pipeline, and because you know what the expectation is, and this is a top-line winger, right? What does that mean? Does it change anything about the potential free agents that you're going after or the trades that you're trying to do? Does it change, for example, and please, everybody, pump the brakes before you get to anything, before you start typing away. Does it change anything about going after a guy like Stamkos, for example? Or there was rumors for about 8 seconds earlier this day when we're recording that Patrick Kane, but it seems like he's re-signing with Detroit. But guys like this, these older guys, past their perhaps prime, but still putting up massive points, perhaps signing these guys for a 2-3 year deal, paying them a lot of money to have them come in. Is there still a worth for that? Guys, perhaps even like Marchessault, who's going to command a big salary. Do you still go after a guy like this?
I think you have to be more vigilant and more, you have to study a little bit more on what your plan is. But I don't think it stops you necessarily from going out and getting talent. You need more talent, man. You don't know what this guy is. You know how long it's going to take for him to develop either. Like you need to fill those roster spots for the time being. You need to compete and you need to get better and more talented. It's not as if they're like, I understand everyone's excited about it. And I understand that there was cause for optimism at the end of the year. But these guys are going to go through ups and downs, and you don't know exactly still. There's ways to go with a lot of these guys in terms of development, and they need to prove that they could do it in a winning, in a winning environment, and not just when there's nothing at stake, and when you're almost trying to get to the bottom of the standings. And so, to me, there's nothing wrong with going to get talent. Obviously, it does affect it a little bit. You look at that right side, and you're like, okay, well, maybe it's in your head, but should it affect maybe a move down the line? I don't think so.
Fair enough. Vito?
I think it's going to depend on who they move out and make the space for those players. And, it's all going to depend on that. If you tell me, hey, we moved out Josh Anderson or moved out Christian Dvorak and those contracts to open up some space for guys next year and the year after, then it doesn't really matter. The spots are there. But to Dave's point, be a bit more vigilant. Comes back again. Be careful on how big of a contract you give. don't want to go 5-6 years contracts unless it's somebody that you really feel should be on the team for 5-6 years, whether Demidov's there or not. Going 2-3 years is probably not a bad idea, especially for somebody like Marchessault if he's willing to take that. Because when you think of it, and I'm not saying that they have to get Marchessault. We've spoken about this. I do think he can bring a lot to the Montreal Canadiens and help them out. I think that if a contract ends in 2-3 years, it kind of falls into that window of when Demidov does come, if it takes some time, the transition period. So then, it's not so bad if maybe even it's 1 year before he gets to the top line or 2 years before he gets to the top line. And at that point, Marchessault's contract's gone, Gallagher's contract will be gone, all of that stuff. So be vigilant, be careful. Stamkos would be great. That'd be a fantastic addition to the Montreal Canadiens one way or another because it'll help, and you just make the space for somebody like that. You're not going to sign him 4 or 5 years. It'd be a 3-year contract.
Yeah, and I mean, right? We can play. Yeah, and everybody coming out and banging at their screen. Stamkos wouldn't want to come here. Why would he come to the Canadiens? We're not saying he would. We're just it's spitballing names. These are the big names that are out there. These are the names that people are going to likely call with a team that has Martin St. Louis and Vincent Lecavalier on it. You figure now that we know it's pretty much guaranteed he's going to UFA, they're gonna call him. They're gonna
call him. I think where Montreal needs to really try to upgrade on is, believe it or not, is their bottom six. They have a lot of big contracts there, but they're guys that kind of feel like dead weight at this point.
You can't get rid of them.
Well, now is the time where he's going to have to be creative and crafty. If they're looking and saying, okay, listen, we got several picks for next year, but we might not need them all. You might have to tack on a pick to move a contract. The problem is the retaining salary. I don't think Montreal wants to go into the season with all of the salary retention spots used up. So they might have to pay a good chunk, a good price to move a body. But somebody's got to go. They got to move space, even if it's to bring in some of the AHL guys or something. But you're going into next year with Harvey Pinard, Pezzetta, Armia, Dvorak, Gallagher, Anderson. These are some contracts that it's rough to see that. It really is. So, in my opinion, if Kent Hughes is able to move one of the bigger contracts, even if it's just Armia, because his contract's probably more digestible than the other players we mentioned, it'd be a very successful summer. And I think that's where they need. If they could go they look at the free agency and there's a player that just fits the bottom six a little more, then do it. Somebody that's not going to be so much of a dead weight on those lines.
Okay, I think that's a given. I mean, whether they're going free agent, big name hunting or not, I think they're going to be trying to do what you're suggesting. They'd be crazy not to. I don't know how he's going to pull that off, like you suggest. I mean, Armia is probably the easier target to move because of the contract. I don't know who or how you pull off an Anderson move with that kind of contract and term still. Even Gallagher is the same boat. Even if you
Anderson would have
first next year.
Anderson would have to be a problem for problems. Maybe somebody that costs a bit more, but you have to figure out how to, or a team that would we know that Anderson's not going to be a 60, 70, 80 point guy, but he causes some chaos. We need to get that Anderson back.
I don't move Anderson for problem. I don't see a benefit to that. I mean, you if you're gonna move him and you try to move him, it's because you're adding so much to it to make it attractive. It's kind of like the Monahan thing out of Calgary, where they offered the first just to take him. I mean, you'd have to do more than that to take the Anderson contract because there's so much more term and everything. But yeah, I want to switch gears just back to the free agency. A name that we hadn't talked about before, but seems to be percolating now as we get closer to UFA. Dave, would you take Jake DeBrusk?
Oof, I like that name. I like Jake DeBrusk, what he does in Boston. I think I would. It just depends. I think he's going to get paid too much money. He's going to get overpaid. So I don't think it'll happen. But in theory, I would take Jake DeBrusk. I think he performs well in the playoffs. He's a guy who's been there before. He has, but I don't know. I don't know if he'll cost too much. So I'll probably say no.
Okay.
He'll cost too much, and he's also inconsistent. We have enough inconsistency.
Yeah, that's fair. That's also a good.
And I have a few friends that are Bruins fans. I don't know how I'm associated with these people, but they actually are very happy that DeBrusk is going. Now, part of it is hatred for the fact that he got drafted over other players that draft here. But it's like they look at me and they're like, "Oh, the Bruskin's up to Montreal. Good luck." That's the reaction we get. So
I don't know. I think he could be a key piece. Like if he's surrounded by the right players and not leaned on, I think he could provide
the right players. The guy was surrounded by Bergeron and Marchand and Pasternak. Like, I mean, how more right do you want it to be?
Yeah, okay, but that was a very top-heavy team, and then the
right
rest of, then it fell on them right after. I don't know, man. To me, it's I understand. I would tend to give him a pass on that, to be honest, because in he was good in some big game moments, man, especially in the playoffs. He did perform, so I'm okay. I'd be willing to see what he does in another environment. But as I said, it's gonna be,
27 years old. He had 40 points in 80 games last year.
Yeah, terrible year last year. But in the playoffs,
so I would say he's a guy that if they signed him and the contract is reasonable, then it'd be like
reasonable.
I have my reservations, but I'd be like, okay, I could see what you're trying to do, but would I be like jumping for joy, like, oh my God, they got Jake DeBrusk 3-4 years ago? Maybe, not now.
Okay, that's fair. I kind of feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a guy. It's not a name that necessarily makes me want to go, oh my God. But at the same time, too, I'm starting to temper my expectations about what they're going to go out and try to acquire. I mean, would I like to see the big name come in for better or worse? I know we talked about Laine a couple episodes ago, and people were like, no, stay away, stay away. It's still someone who excites me for whatever reason. I think it would be a really interesting player to come here. I don't know what's going to happen with him, but he's a name. We talked about Stamkos as a big name. The Martin Nikis thing, still, we don't know what's happening there. So there's still that. Apparently, there's talks about trying to acquire, but now they've run out of time. So I don't know what's going to happen.
The rumor there is that Carolina's just asking too much. And I think, it's just my theory, they're so fixated about the fact that they came so close to acquiring Elias Pettersson in a package that involved Nikis that now it's like they want somebody of that caliber. And it's like, you're not going to get it. And if you would have gotten Pettersson at the time in a massive package that would have sent Nikis the other way, you were just super lucky to have gotten
that. I want to throw 3 names that we haven't talked about and close off on this because free agent frenzy is going to be coming up in the next day or so at the time of this recording. So we don't know what's happening yet, but 3 names. I want to hear your take on it. All right. If the Habs acquired any one of these 3 guys, I want to know whether or not you guys would be happy about it or be like, oh my God, why? And if so, explain. First guy I throw out at you is David Perron. This is the vet. Hypothetically, they go out and forget the big name huntings. Now we're in perhaps a tier under that. They're going to try to get a vet, whatever the reason. David Perron's the guy that comes back. A little bit about him: 36, 47 points in 76 games last year.
I'd pass.
Where were you when he was, he could have came 3-4 years ago? Or where you now you want to come at 36?
So
do I want another Danny Briere situation? I don't want.
So you say no for spite, okay? Dave, you say no because
the age just doesn't fit. I'll pass on him.
You pass. Okay. I go to the next guy, Anthony Mantha, 29 years old, 44 points in 74 games last year.
Take your drama and go elsewhere.
Drama. Jeez.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I'd also pass on him. He's just the type of guy that it's just like the typical. I don't know. I wouldn't want. I wouldn't want to.
We just spoke about dead weight and other players. We're going to add more dead weight.
Anthony Mantha's dead weight.
Dead weight. It doesn't move the needle enough to say here's a contract. He's going to be somebody that's not looking for a 1 or 2 year contract, and I'm not willing to commit 4 or 5 years just to say, hey, you want to come to Montreal, or let's have the conversation so you could use Montreal as a means to get more money elsewhere. No, I'm not even going to entertain.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Okay.
Bye-bye.
And the last guy, and this I say more in jest, but anyways, the last guy I throw out, and the only reason why I say him in particular is because if the Habs have him, he can stop killing the Habs whenever we play against him. It's the only reason. I suggest to you,
guy's been on the market all of 4 minutes. I knew it.
Jeff Skinner, 32 years old, 46 points in 74 games. The man who holds the record for the most NHL games played without a playoff. Jeff Skinner, who is a known Hab killer. Would you offer him something?
for a guy who's yourself, for somebody who's 6'3", why do you want so many tiny players on this team?
I'm not saying I want or don't want.
You're
Also,
6'3"?
Don't throw my business out there. People don't need to know that. I'm going to shrink back down a little bit. Okay? Jeff Skinner, I'm throwing the name out there. This is not my personal list, and I'm throwing it out there. I'm looking at a list over here. He's available. He got bought out.
The only thing that's enticing about the guy, and you don't know, is the fact that he has so much money coming in one way or another, and has earned so much for a guy who's never played a playoff game. Okay, that he might actually accept, for the right team and right circumstances and situation, a lesser deal. He actually could afford to do so, but it depends how greedy he is. He could be somebody that comes in and says, "Hey, no, sign me 3 years, $5 million a year," because he is worth that. If you look at his numbers, his game, he is worth at least $5 million.
He's hit 40 goals, right? If I'm not.
Yes.
Oh, we got to freeze Dave.
Am I back?
Yep. Yeah, you're back.
All right, he has a 40-goal season, if I'm not mistaken. A couple of 30-goal seasons under his belt. One, not last year, but probably the year before. Man, like he'd be an interesting player to take a flyer on, but again, I think he'd be too expensive.
Okay. I also think that he's
too expensive for what he is, right? Is what we're saying?
Yes, obviously.
Okay.
And just it doesn't fit in what the Canadiens are trying to do. I just feel like he just wouldn't fit in what they're trying to do. I think that,
Okay, so I want to give you guys some updates that are non-Habs related, if you're okay with this, just so that it eliminates certain names off the board. But Tanev is signed with, has come to terms or won a contract with Toronto. Okay. Gensel is pretty much done with Tampa.
Yeah.
Okay, that's confirmed. I think that's all the updates I got for now. But those guys are pretty much done. And Patrick Kane seems like it's all but done 1 year with Detroit.
With Detroit. Am I crazy or am I misreading this? Is Elias Lindholm a UFA or RFA? Because he's on the UFA list.
He wouldn't be an RFA.
He's on the UFA list.
Well, he's not from Montreal either. If that's what you're getting at.
29 years old, 44 points, 75 games.
He is a UFA. It's true.
He's a UFA. Any interest there? Or you're saying no?
No, because you're going to put him where? Center? So he's taking Doc's spot?
He plays wing as well. He could play wing. Doc could go to wing. He can play center.
I think a team like Boston's going to come out and give him exactly what he wants because they actually have a much bigger need down the middle than Montreal does for centers. Like Montreal could use centers. They really can. And I'm not scoffing at Elias Lindholm. It's not pressing for them to go and rush to go pay a significant amount of money, which it will be expensive to get Elias Lindholm.
No, I think so too.
I don't see it happening, to be honest.
I mean, so what we're saying here then, gentlemen, as we close off this episode is we're expecting July 1st to come and go. And if somebody comes into this organization, we're not going to get our socks blown off here.
The thing is with free agency, right, is that you kind of have to be in the thick of things to make it work because you always overpay for free agents, right? It's almost always, especially the big guns. So while I could see them signing some, like as Vito said, the bottom six, got help along the way, sure. But I think if they're going to bring in an impact player, it's going to be more through a trade than it will be on free agency.
Yes, and you know what? It wouldn't surprise me. I'd actually be happy, because they said it was pretty close for McGroarty. Maybe he's who they think is an impact player. It would make a lot of Habs fans happy. But I think they'd have to do something more. But it's to today's point. I think this is going to be more via trade. By the way, Tanev deal is $5 million.
Oof.
That's rich for Tanev.
Well, listen, we're going to see what happens. I know a lot of guys are going to be available. Guys that aren't necessarily top guys, but like to Vito's point, if what they're going to look for is to bolster the bottom six, there's going to be a plentiful of them out there. It's very curious to see what this lineup's going to look like after tomorrow or the next day or whenever the free agency is. And so with that, guys, I think, again, we end on this. Please let us know in the comments below. I mean, I suspect I know what the comments are going to be like, but how did you like the draft? Were you happy with the pick with Demidov? What did you like? What did you didn't like? What are you looking forward to for free agency? Who would you look for the Habs to go and sign. Let us know all in the comments below. We'll try to get to all your comments as often as we can, like we do. Of course, like and subscribe if you haven't. Pass along that message. Thanks very much, everybody. And for Dave and Vito, I'm Matt. And this was Get Pucked.